It's another edition of Time About the Movies, and today we're taking a look at the films of February 21st, 2003. We got 5 films to look at today, so we have a lot of films to get to here, so let's go ahead and jump on into it. We'll start off with the biggest new release of the weekend, and that is Luke Wilson, Vince Vaughn, and Will Ferrell in Todd Phillips' Old School.
21st, you're officially starting a fraternity.
He looks like he's 100 years old.
Take the pledge.
Ring the bell, you pancake.
Big party.
What's going on?
Tell anyone about this, I'll kill you. I'm kidding. Old School. Rated R. February 21st, everywhere.
I promised my wife I wouldn't drink tonight. We're going drinking!
Why do men act like boys?
Careful with that.
Yes. Because they can. Old School. Rated R. Starts tomorrow, everywhere.
One of the first official films from the frat pack era, if you will, because you got Vince Vaughn and Will Ferrell, who made a ton of movies in that category. You have those two, along with Luke Wilson, as depressed men in their 30s who seek to relive their college days by starting a fraternity and the trials and tribulations they encounter in doing so. This is, of course, Todd Phillips' follow-up to Road Trip, which put his name on the map. This is also written by the same guy who would eventually co-written by the same man, Scott Armstrong, who Phillips would eventually re-team with for the Hangover movies. And what can you say about this movie that hasn't already been said, man? This is a freaking funny movie, man. This is what a raunchy comedy is supposed to be. It's a raunchy college comedy with 3 guys clearly in their 30s, and it works very well. A cast that includes not only really good talents in the three main leading roles, but if you look at the cast of this movie, it's got a lot of talent involved in it. I mean, we're talking about, Ari Gold pre-Entourage is in here. Jeremy Piven. You've got you've got Meredith Grey from Grey's Anatomy. I couldn't remember what her first name was. I knew she was the title character in Grey's Anatomy. I just couldn't remember the first name. But no, Ellen Pompeo was in this movie. You got Juliette Lewis. You got Leah Remini from The King of Queens in here. Perry Reeves, of course, Ari's wife from Entourage as well. Craig Kilborn, who was still on The Late Late Show at the time. Simon Helberg, pre-Big Bang Theory. Sean William Scott. Jack Bauer's daughter, Elijah Cuthbert from 24, Rick Gonzalez, Artie Lang, Rob Corddry, Harv Presnell, Snoop Dogg, James Carville, Warren G, Andy Dick, Terry O'Quinn has an uncredited cameo in this as well. A lot of talent across the board in this movie, and the movie is just so hilarious and well done. You could tell that this was made by the same person who was there when he was making Animal House. He was one of the producers on Animal House, Ivan Reitman was, and you knew that he had the chops to make this work, and sure enough, here it is, like a film that is just so freaking funny, man. And just shows off what makes these actors all so special. The jokes in here are very funny, and of course, what most notable about this movie, this was the first film to feature Will Ferrell in a post-Saturday Night Live, and of course, this is the beginning of his career as a leading film actor, and kind of like with John Belushi in Animal House, it's the film that put him on the map, essentially. But unlike John Belushi, who usually took his time with his films, Will Ferrell had a couple of big hits in this particular movie. We'll get to the other big one when we get towards the end of the year, but just a freaking phenomenal movie, man. I can't recommend this one enough. It's funny, it's so twisted and hilarious. It's the perfect definition of a great raunchy college comedy, and something that sadly is becoming a dying art form, unfortunately, but we're seeing it slowly come back, the raunchy comedy. We've had it with No Hard Feelings, which was really good from last year, but I'm hoping that's the beginning of the trend moving forward, that we're starting to get some really good raunchy comedies again, because we've been on kind of a lull the last couple of years, but this was kind of the film that was one of the films that kind of cemented the return of the raunchy comedy back then, and of course would lead to a number of different movies with the frat pack in general, and we're going to get to a couple of them throughout the course of this year too, so stick around for that if you will, but yeah. Old School's pretty freaking awesome. What more do I gotta say? Let's move on to the next movie, and here's an awkward film with Kevin Spacey in it. It's The Life of David Gale.
I know that I'm not doing too well. I would do anything to pass.
Anything, huh?
Anything.
Something profoundly stupid happened last night.
Don't look away.
You shouldn't be doing this.
Don't miss a word.
Mr. Gale, calls the police.
Because the truth
Someone's framing you.
Oh, it's more than that.
will blow your mind.
Oh my God.
The Life of David Gale. Rated R at theaters Friday.
Aged like fine wine. This is, of course, a film with Kevin Spacey in the title role. It's co-produced by Nicolas Cage and written by Charles Randolph, who would actually later go on to win an Oscar for writing the script for The Big Short with Adam McKay, and directed and co-produced by Alan Parker. And you have the story of Spacey as the college professor and longtime activist against capital punishment, who was sentenced to death for killing a fellow capital punishment opponent. You also have Kate Winslet, Laura Linney, Gabriel Mann, and also Rona Mitra in here. And a film like this should be very thought-provoking and very intriguing, having a lot of interesting conversations about the death penalty and, capital punishment and all that. But no, this is the type of film that opens up in February where you look at it and then you realize, yeah, this is why this is released in February, because this is something that they clearly decided to dump there. Because the whole idea of the film is supposed to be an argument. It should be an argument about, the death penalty, like I said, and capital punishment, and is it going too far, and all that type of stuff. And then it's just like, no, it just goes the traditional, predictable thriller route. Like it's a movie that's trying to pound the message into your head so much, and a good film should not do that, especially a film by Alan Parker. This is a guy that has done a ton of great movies over the course of his career. Bugsy Malone, Midnight Express, Fame, Pink Floyd's The Wall, Angel Heart, Mississippi Burning, The Commitments, Evita, and this was the last film he directed before he passed away, and he essentially retired after this movie came out. And the whole idea of the movie really is, it's not really giving you the right message of how to handle the situation here. Like, it's a film that's supposed to be, like, it really makes you question whether or not you should be for the death penalty, when the right answer to that should be, yes, you should be in support of the death penalty. But, like, a good movie, take for example what we just had recently, Civil War. What made that movie great? Because it didn't pick sides. It didn't pick sides on which side it should be on. It made you, the audience, think about which side you should be on. And it made you think. This is a film that does not make you think whatsoever. It confuses you more than it makes you think. And it's amazing how this film actually holds a place in history now, because you may not have heard of this story, but I just found this out when I was doing the research on this. But in the Philippines, there was a senator and a 2022 presidential candidate, Ping Lacson, who actually credited the film in changing his mind on capital punishment. He had previously served as the nation's chief of police, was an advocate of capital offense for heinous crimes. However, he said, after seeing the movie on Netflix, he said, and quote, "My eyes were opened that it is more important to save the life of someone innocent and convict them to execute someone who really is convicted and proven to have committed a crime." Afterwards, he withdrew his authorship of a bill proposing the death penalty for heinous crimes. This film has a place in history, and quite frankly, I don't know why, because of all the things that you could have gotten this information from, why did it have to be this film? I mean, it's like when Contagion suddenly got this reappraisal because of COVID, and the movie was terrible back then. It's still terrible now. I'm sorry, that movie, I love Steven Soderbergh, but that's one of his worst films he's ever made as a director, bar none. And this is right up there with Contagion as one of those movies where it's just like, you really got inspiration from watching this? Yeah, it's just not a good movie. It doesn't ask you any questions. It just wants you to watch something that clearly would have been seen as the Lifetime movie of the week if it didn't have these big actors and this huge director involved with it and a major studio behind it. But other than that, there's no reason why this should have been put in theaters per se. Like, I don't know. It just didn't work for me personally. So that's the life of David Gale. So let's go ahead and move on to the next movie we have here, and that is Gods and Generals. Still not as good as Ted Turner's last production he had.
I'd like to announce I'm giving a gift the whole world can appreciate. I've colorized the moon.
Actually, to be fair, this actually does play a significant part of the history of Ted Turner and how he started TBS, TNT, and Cartoon Network. And this was a major game-changing for him because the film did not perform as well as they thought it was going to, and it really hurt him in the long run. The story of this movie is that you follow the story of Stonewall Jackson from the beginning of the American Civil War to his death at the Battle of Chancellorsville. It stars Stephen Lang as Stonewall Jackson, Jeff Daniels as Lieutenant Colonel Joseph Chamberlain, and Robert Duvall as General Robert E. Lee. And the film ran for originally 5 hours in length. They actually cut it down to an hour and a half. That means it's still 3.5 hours long. And they decided put this on the big screen, and Ted Turner put his money where his mouth was, because he actually literally put $60 million into the production of the film, not to mention an additional $30 million to distribute it. So it's actually one of the most expensive independent films ever produced. This is technically not on Warner Brothers overall, even though they released the film. The movie was all, most of the money came from Ted Turner's pocket, and that was huge because the film unfortunately failed to make money at the box office. It was not a big hit. Not to say that it wasn't received well by critics. Most people actually did appreciate the film, but it basically caused Ted Turner, who was at the time losing much of his wealth because of the AOL Time Warner merger, and he actually invested his investment in the film to be 15% of his assets in general. So he had to cancel the plans to actually adapt the third story, because they did Gettysburg before this, which was the last full measure, which never made it to the big screen, despite the fact that there was a lot of ambition to turn the profits in this into that next film. I think the biggest problem with this movie in general is the fact that it is a theatrical release. I mean, it's not a bad movie. It's just a film that, it just feels like a film that probably would have been better as a miniseries, like a big epic sweeping miniseries, like something on the lines of a Roots kind of, it's like a big television event, when you could still get away with doing this as a big television network event for a major network. Like, if this had aired as a TNT miniseries and you put a lot of promotion into it, you probably would have had something really, really big in terms of ratings-wise, but the fact that they put this up on the big screen, I think, really hurt it in the long run. They also put a lot of promotion to it. There was actually a video game that came out and was actually released on PlayStation 2, if I'm not mistaken. PlayStation 2 and Xbox, I think? Okay, maybe I was wrong about it being a PlayStation 2 release. It's released only as a PC Windows exclusive, but the fact they made a game off of this, they were really hoping that this was going to be something big, and in terms of success-wise, and it just really wasn't there. It's gotten really rotten reviews on there, but I didn't think the movie was all that bad. I thought there was a noble effort being put into it, and yeah, it's not as good as something like Gettysburg was, because I think Gettysburg really is the best of the two movies, but this film in particular, I don't think it's as bad as people make it out to be. You can definitely see the effort is there to make something as a big, grand, sweeping epic, but not a lot of people really want to see this on the big screen, especially when you have to sit there for 3.5 hours. I mean, you have to be able to make something unique and something interesting to keep the audience's attention going on this for a long period of time. And it's not like we can't do that, because last year we had 2 movies that were long films, but they were very intriguing films, engaging films. Oppenheimer, Kills of the Flower Moon. Those were two of the best movies from last year. So it's not impossible to do that. With this, it just feels like it was just the wrong approach, essentially, to take this to the big screen and hope for success here. But perhaps, maybe, because we've got Horizon: An American Saga coming up, the Kevin Costner film that's being split up into 2 parts. And if that works out, that's probably what they should have done with this. Split it up into 2 films, and build some interesting characters, build some buzz on the first film, and then release the second movie. But again, we still have to see if Horizon's going to make any money. And if it doesn't, it could probably turn into another Gods and Generals type of thing. Except they split that film up into 2 movies. But this, yeah, I don't know. I didn't hate it as much as everybody else did. I thought it was okay. I don't think it was as great as that. I don't think it was as bad, I should say, as everyone makes it out to be, because it's got like an 8% on Rotten Tomatoes. Like, this movie has a lot of things to it that are very positive, and trust me, it's better than some of the movies that would have been around that same general area in terms of that ratings percentage. But I thought it was all right. I don't think it's as bad as everyone makes it out to be. It's no Gettysburg, though. So, yeah, that's Gods in General. So let's go ahead and move on to the next movie, and that is Kurt Russell in Ron Shelton's Dark Blue.
Raised up to be a gunfighter by a family of gunfighters. There are cops who live by their own rules. You gotta be heartless in my line of work. There's Eldon Perry. You knock one down, make sure he stays down. I ain't got a gun! Yeah, you do! On February 21st, only one man.
Speaking of films that probably don't get the proper respect they deserve, Dark Blue's pretty cool. You have it set in the Los Angeles Police Department in April of 1992, and it's a dramatic thriller that takes place just the days before the acquittal of 4 white officers in the beating of black motorist Rodney King and the subsequent LA riots. In this racially charged climate, the LAPD's elite Special Investigation Squad is assigned a high-profile quadruple homicide as they work with the case. You have a veteran detective named Eldon Perry, played by Kurt Russell, known for his tough street tactics and fiery temper, and tutoring a rookie, Bobby Keogh, in the grim realities of police intimidation and corruption. Meanwhile, Assistant Chief Holland, played by Ving Rhames, the only man in the department willing to stand up to the sis, threatens to end Perry's brand of single-handed justice on the Los Angeles streets. While navigating through the tumultuous neighborhoods of South Central LA, Perry and Keogh must track down cold-blooded killers and face their own demons, which prove to be more ruthless than the criminals they pursue. Keogh was played by Scott Speedman, who would later go on to star in Underworld within the next year. Brendan Gleeson's also in here. Ron Shelton's wife, Olivia Davidovich, Candy Alexander, Jonathan Banks. A pretty good cast overall here, and kind of a film that maybe is a little bit ahead of its time. You've got a great, not just a great cast in general with the people involved in here, but Ron Shelton, who's made a lot of great movies, Bull Durham, criminally underrated films like Blaze, David Ayer, who would later go on to write stuff like Street Kings, Harsh Times, and End of Watch, and James Ellroy, who wrote the story of this. He wrote the story for this, and he wrote L.A. Confidential. So the pieces are definitely there, and I'm not going to say the movie is a great film overall, but I think it's a film that deserves a lot more respect than it gets, because the performances in here are really what carries the load of the film. Kurt Russell and Ving Rhames, I think, are very good in this film. Scott Speedman shows a lot of what he can do. The film is very dark and gritty, and that's what I really appreciate about that. Like, it doesn't pull any punches. It knows exactly how far it needs to go to get its point across. And some might say it's a little bit comparative to something like Training Day or Narc, which I think are much better films, but I think the film overall is still very complex and interesting enough that you still get attached to the ideas of it, and you get invested in how the story's going to end. And I think it's a film that really does work better than I think a lot of people would let on. And I think it's a film that should get more attention than it deserves. It's a film that I think is criminally a little bit underrated. So, yeah, definitely check out Dark Blue. So with that said, let's go ahead and move on to our last movie here, Juliette Binoche and Jean Reno in the French romantic comedy Jet Lag.
Départ indéterminé sur tous les vols. Ça veut dire quoi, départ indéterminé? Non, on paye comme... Monsieur, je peux vous l'emprunter 2 minutes?
Rendez mon portable.
Oh, je m'excuse, pardon.
Au revoir.
Au revoir.
C'est qui, lui?
Je suis personne.
Personne.
Contact. Alors allez-y. Posez-moi toutes les questions qui vous brûlent les lèvres. Allez-y.
I honestly would have never brought this movie up if I had not seen the advertisements when the movie newspapers nowadays probably don't have this as much, but back in the day, newspapers used to have movie ads, and there was one for this film in particular that something compelled me about it. Something made me want to see this movie, and I never got around to seeing it until very later on. But in the film, you have, at Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris, a French beautician played by Juliette Binoche who's on her way to a new job in Mexico and accidentally meets a French chef played by Jean Reno, who has been delayed on his way to Germany from his residence in the United States. Labor strikes, bad weather, and pure luck causes the two of them to share a room overnight at the airport Hilton Hotel. Their initial mutual indifference and downright hostility evolves into romance and a re-examination of their lives, and I think you can figure out where it goes from there. And it's about as good as a fun romantic comedy can be. Like, it's not a movie that's very manipulative. You do buy into the chemistry and the relationship between Binoche and Reno. You believe that they can actually be a couple in real life, and it's very interesting to see Jean Reno in a role that's a little bit out of the norm for him. We're not used to seeing him in a very romantic leading role here, but he plays it off very well, and I think the chemistry between Binoche and Reno really makes it stand out the most in this particular film. The joke can be funny sometimes. The visuals can look really impressive. I thought it was a very good film. I thought it was a very underrated little gem. I'm glad I got to see it when I did, because it did kind of live up to the initial thoughts I had about it. This thing could look promising, and it definitely lives up to that promise in general. I thought it was a very fun film. Nothing too grand, nothing too amazing, but it's one you should probably definitely check out. A little bit of an underrated gem here, Jet Lag. And so with that said, we wrap up another edition of Time About the Movies, and we're wrapping February up on the next episode with 3 films in particular. including Jet Li and also DMX and Cradle to the Grave. Had to remember if I got that casting right, because I've been kind of wrong on that the last couple of months, but last couple of times I've done this. But we also have Pool Hole Junkies, and we also have a film that you might have heard of, some of you may have not, but I gotta talk about it. It's a film called A Fishtail, and it gets pretty interesting. It's like a little unknown animated film, which I guess was at least from a couple years prior to this, but I've seen some stuff from it, and this is something that I feel like I need to talk about. So we'll delve into that one on the next episode. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you will once we get to it. But we'll get to that one next week, as well as Cradle to the Grave and Pool Hall Junkies. But until then, thank you so much for watching, and if you want to see more videos like this, please hit the players on the next page. Check out the previous episode, and also don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button if you want to see more videos like this on this channel. So with that said, I am off. I will see you guys next time, and until then, as always, take care.